Hi, this is Mad Cat, and oh, live now. Hi, this is Mad Cat, and I am talking about the abuse that I suffered while I was in Detroit. Um, and I kind of wanted to wait to talk about this, but at the same time, I feel that it's necessary that I also talk about it now, because I can remember it a lot better now than say versus later, and I may talk about it as the months come because it was actually pretty traumatic. Um, it's hard to talk about this because, on one hand, I don't think I really have room to say that, I was really the victim of domestic violence. It only happened one time and, it never happened again, but there was also other other things that happened during that time. And I guess if you look at it as a whole, it really you can understand how need to talk about this. Oh, hold on, I'm closing out of some stuff. All right. I guess I'll start with I guess I should have saw the warning signs when it happened. I'm looking at live chat by the way on my cell phone, so if you want to say something, I'll try to read it on the air. Um I know I keep saying a lot. I don't mean to, but so a little bit of backstory. I've known this girl for about 18 years. We had a foundation in which we knew each other. After about a year of knowing each other, we kind of went our separate ways, but thanks to Facebook, we kept in touch here and there. She ended up getting married twice and she had two children. About 2 years ago, we really started chatting with each other, and she was certain that she wanted to leave her husband. Actually, she was kind of on the fence about it. She wasn't really happy in her marriage, but you know, part of her really wanted to leave. But she really liked the idea of being in a relationship with me. And I told her, well, you've got to choose this carefully. Don't leave him unless you're absolutely certain that you want to. And she ended up going back with him. She wanted to try to make it work. And then maybe about 6 to 8 months after that, we started talking again, and she was back on about how she wanted to um, leave her husband again. And this is about the time that I was in Philadelphia. So we started chatting and we started talking about, being in a relationship together and how would it all work. And I told her that I was in Philadelphia for a while. So um, then almost about this time a year ago, but it was about, I don't know, 15 months ago, she said that she could no longer be in a relationship with me. I mean, we weren't really in a relationship, but there was an interest there. But she said that she couldn't really be in a relationship with me because she felt that I wasn't that great of a person, that I was a user. And the specific thing that she was talking about is that I was trying to go into business with a friend who was also disabled, but they were their disability was getting the better of them. And I said to this girl that, it's like, unfortunately, I'm going to have to dump her from the project because, I'm trying to get my life moving. And, she's not able to contribute. My ex took that to mean that I only saw her value as how she could directly help me, and I didn't see anything else. This person that I was referring to, my disabled friend, I am still very good friends with her now. And she actually understood that, um, I had to let her go. But I really didn't want to, but at the same time, I knew that I needed to. But my ex girlfriend just took that to mean that I didn't really care about anyone, and she chose to break up with me. Of course, she did the whole thing over text, so it's like I couldn't really respond to her, and we just stopped talking after that. But I was like, "Well, I don't ever wanna talk to you again," and she's like, "Why wouldn't you wanna be friends? We've been friends for 17 years. Are you really just gonna throw away a friendship like that?" And it's like, you're the one who's saying that I'm this horrible person, that you don't wanna be in a relationship with me, but you still wanna be friends with me? So probably about 8 months later, she tried contacting me again because I never deleted her from my life, I just put her on hidden, and I wanted to give her the opportunity to reach out to me again, but, 8 months went by, and she finally contacted me saying that she wanted to give me my space, and I'll tell you, I really want to tell her to go to hell, but I didn't. I mean, I was really angry with her, but, I gave her a chance, and then we ended up talking about getting in a relationship. And I told her about my situation, that I was facing homelessness. And we started discussing the plan of me moving in with her. Now, she actually flew down to Philadelphia to meet me. She really wanted to make the first effort to be there for me. And it went okay, except for a single incident that should have told me there was a cause for concern. I was driving her back to the airport, and we had like a brief discussion about, something funny I found about Indiana Jones. And she argued that, my interpretation of it was fundamentally flawed, and we just kind of went back and forth on it. But I was driving, and I almost hit someone else as a result. So I said to her, okay, we need to stop this discussion now, because I need to concentrate on driving and I almost hit someone. So I'm going to say that we just stop this conversation. A logical person, as she always claims to be, would have been like, okay, he needs to concentrate on driving, we'll stop. She didn't, however. She continued on with her talking point. And I just yelled at her. I'm like, how fucking dare you? I told you I needed to concentrate on driving, and you go on with your point? Did you not hear anything I said? She's like, yeah, I heard what you said, but I still wanted to voice my opinion. And it's just like she couldn't understand, like, there's a time and place, and that was not it. And yet she just had to get it out. So that was, one of the warning signs that I should have paid attention to, but I didn't. Um, all right. So the initial plan was that it would be about 6 to 8 months before she could move in with me, that she would be in a better position at that time. Um, but then later it was changed that it would be November because she didn't want me spending the time outside in the cold. At first, I tried to live on the streets, but then I stayed in a shelter for a short time. I stayed in a shelter for 30 days in Philly and then 30 days in Detroit. And when I went to Detroit, she agreed to let me move in at the end of September. And at first, it was okay. Now, she told me right away that she, wanted, she was hesitant to introduce me to her kids. One, her ex-husband, or her soon-to-be ex-husband, because they were separated, they weren't divorced, didn't want me to meet the kids at all. And he didn't know me, but he just, I guess, was being difficult for her, to her. But also, she didn't want them to get attached to me just in case the relationship didn't work out. But she's like, well, you might have to spend a few hours outside the home in order for me to be with my kids. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's fine. I mean, I don't really have a choice, but I guess that's fine. And she said, on the occasion, you might have to spend the night in the car and sleep. She only had me do that once, but um, she's like, but I found a library that's nearby. It's like 7 miles away. Actually, no, it was about 4 miles away, but it was like 3.6, but in total it was 7.2 round trip. Which she's offered to drive me, but she couldn't always drive me, so I'd have to walk there. And I have flat feet. And I remember the first time that we really had to do the whole, well, the only time I had to spend the night um in the car, is I had gone to the library. I worked for like 7 hours. And being in a location like that, it was just mentally overwhelming for me. And by working first and foremost is overwhelming, but also being in an environment with bright lights. I mean, that was hard for me. And then I'd walk home and I was gone. I was mentally not there. Well, when she came to give me the keys to the car so I could go into her car and spend the night, she took it to mean that I was pissed off with her. She's like, well, this is what you agreed to. And it was like, and I tried later telling her, well, actually, she came back out after that and she started yelling at me. It's like, you think I like making you do this? Why are you so pissed off with me? I'm like, I'm not mad. I'm just overwhelmed. And later she would say that, I could have given her something, some indication that I was happy to see her. But it's like, I'm mentally overwhelmed. I had nothing left. I didn't really have any mental capacity to talk to her. I had spent 7 hours working straight, which is difficult for me to do, but also walked 7 miles in that day. I was in mental pain, physical pain, psychological pain, and I was like, just done. I didn't want to deal with anything more. And she took it to mean that I was angry with her. And I've tried many times to explain to her what my disability was, but it was never good enough for her. Um, at first, things were okay, but they weren't perfect. And I always chalked it up, well, she's going through a lot in her life. I'm going through a lot in my life. I just got done being in a shelter. I'm not exactly easy to be with because, being in a shelter, you have to be paranoid all the time. You have to be on your feet all the time. And it's just not fun to deal with. And you never really get that out of your system, at least not right away. Um, so we both had our issues, but you know, she just expected perfection pretty much right away. Like I do all the dishes, I make the bed, and it didn't matter that I had work to do. No, all that mattered was I get the things done that she wanted. She wanted me to do the dishes every day. She wanted me to make the bed every day. And that may seem like nothing, but it's like I was also busy working and I was actually behind on a deadline. And I kept telling her, hey, I'm falling behind on this deadline. I need to focus on this. Everything else is second nature because this is how I make my money. And eventually she started getting at me. And it's like, well, if you can't even do this, then you just need to go back to the shelter. And it wouldn't be the first time she uses the shelter against me. She knew I didn't want to go back, so she tried to coerce me to do things by threatening to send me back to the shelter. So during our time together, she had a job, but she wasn't happy with it because she would only get to see her kids for a few hours a day, but only in the morning time before they went to school, which meant I had to be gone during that time, which wasn't a big deal because then I'd get the rest of the day. um, and then, but she wanted the night shift. So, without really talking to me about it, she went ahead and left her job and took another job that would give her the hours that she wanted. The only problem is that it required her to drive around. Now, while it did pay her more money, she ended up spending a lot of her money just on gas, to the point that she's like, "Well, I need you to help me out with gas." Okay, I don't mind helping out with gas. But once I said that, it was like she needed 2 to 3 times a week for me to fill up her gas, and it was like $30 each, so I'm paying $100 right there. And she would always use the argument, well, I pay so much in rent, you can pay your fair share. And it's like, you knew going in that I wouldn't have a lot of money. And I kept telling her I didn't have a lot of money. And yet she would continue to berate me about it, saying, well, I need it because if I can't get it, then I can't keep my job. And then you have to go back to the shelter. Now, the thing that caused her to use so much of her gas actually wasn't going to work. It was seeing her kids because she lived a half an hour away. They were staying with her ex-husband. She would have to drive there, pick them up, bring them back to her home, and then drive them back and come back to her home again. And that was using a lot of gas. And I was telling her, it's like, look, I can't keep giving you money. You've got to figure out some sort of solution here. And she would just immediately go, so you just don't want me to see my kids ever? Is that what you're saying? It's like, no, I'm not saying that. Yeah, you want to see your kids. That's fine. That makes you a good mother. But, you've got to figure out how to balance this because I can't just keep giving you money. I mean, to the point I started having to borrow money from my mother. I had to start borrowing money from my cousin just to give to her. So, and I know what a lot of people will say at this point. Well, you shouldn't have given her anything. But, right at the beginning, I was trying to build a relationship. I was building towards our future. And you don't leave when the going gets tough. You just try to stick with it. And you work on it. I wasn't a quitter in that regard. But after we broke up, which I'll explain in just a moment, I was just trying to survive, and I really didn't want to go back to the shelter. And I have no problem helping out, but I can only help out with what I have. Eventually, I found the solution of going to a plasma bank and giving plasma so I'd have money to give her for gas. Of course, she kind of dragged her feet on doing that herself. Um, she's like, "Oh, I should do that too," and then it took her several weeks to actually do it. So I'd have to wake up so early in the morning, go down there, and but a few weeks into our relationship, she decided that she was no longer attracted to me, to no longer be in a relationship with me. And, I had invested a lot to be there. Not only had I actually gone to Detroit, which I used my own money for, because initially she was supposed to drive down, pick me up, get all my stuff, and go back. And in fact, I left my stuff in Philadelphia because she said that she would help me get it back. And even when I moved to Michigan, she said she would still help me get it back. What I later learned was that what she meant by help was if I pay for everything, she'll help me out. I don't have that kind of money. So She broke up with me, and it's like I said, I wasn't going to give up on the relationship. She did. 3 weeks into it, she's like, "Yeah, I'm just not sure that I can date you anymore. We can't really do anything." And it really affected me. It was part of the reason why I got behind on my work was because I was so depressed. And that's my fault. I'm not going to put that onto her, but it's like I kept telling her, "Look, I need to get my this deadline going," and she's just like, "Well, there's nothing I can do about it," because she had to see her kids every single day, or if not, as many days as possible. And she couldn't understand. It's like, and I kept trying to explain to her, if I finish my job, I have money. If I have money, I can give it to you for gas, which means it's in your best interest that I finish my work. She hmm, she never saw it that way. No matter how many times I explained it to her, it was, well, I see my kids. That's always going to happen. So you have to figure something out. She could have sacrificed a day, but she could never saw it that way. She's like, you expect me never to see my kids, always with that argument. And I always told her, she always goes to the extreme. And she's like, I'm just trying to understand your point. And it's like, then ask, what point are you trying to make? Rather than going to the extreme and putting me on the defensive. So let's talk about the physical abuse that I suffered. And this isn't really easy for me to talk about, but fortunately, it only happened one time, but I kind of foresaw it to happen. Like, when we got into arguments, which we got into arguments all the time. I mean, if I moved around and I was going to get close to her, she started swinging at me. I'm like, whoa, were you about to hit me? She's like, no, I was just trying to keep you at a distance. But she swore up and down to me she would never actually hit me. So one morning, because she woke up at like 5, 6, 7 in the morning, and she would have to do that so she could take her kids to school, and then she would eventually come back and then later go to work if she went to work that day. Oh, by the way, part of the reason why she used so much gas is that she took her kids to work every morning. She'd have to pick them up, take them to their school, and then drive back, just wasting fuel. And look, I'm not so heartless that I don't understand that a parent wants to see their children and will do whatever they can. But why is that my responsibility? I'm barely surviving as it is why should I give all my money to her? And she's like, well, I'm paying the majority of the rent here. And it's like, this is money you would have already spent. And it's not like you give me the opportunity to actually get my work done. I mean, eventually I get more work done, but she just I don't know. I just don't think that I should have been responsible for her habits, and she should have found some way. But anyways, that morning she had opened up the curtain wide. I'm sitting there sleeping. I usually don't wake up until noon because it's actually hard to sleep in that place. And usually I didn't go to bed until 3 or 4 in the morning because it was both loud and just it was always uncomfortable because we'd sleep in the same bed. But you know, she opened up the curtain so it's bright in there, and then she went out and got the car. So I woke up. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I mean, I wasn't even really awake. I was still technically asleep, but I was just somewhat aware. Well, she parks the car and then comes in, but she sort of mumbles it. All I hear is, I open the curtain. And then she immediately goes into the bathroom. And I'm confused by this. Why open up the curtain if you go right into the bathroom? So I close the curtain. I'm not thinking. All I want to do is go back to sleep. And, so I close the curtains, I go back to sleep. And she comes back out and it's like, well, why did you do that? I left those open for a reason. If you had any common sense, you would know that I haven't done this for a month. And if I'm doing this now, then you should be able to figure out why I'm doing it, or just trust that there's a good reason. Um, and it really caused an argument, but it's like, I didn't know. You didn't explain it to me. It's like, well, I'm in a rush this morning. I don't have time to just sit there and explain for a minute. I'm like, you don't even have to take a minute to explain. You could stop for 5 seconds and say, look, I left this open because I need to keep my eye on the car. But even then, that doesn't make sense if she goes right into the bathroom. Now, I later understood that she was trying to warm up the car, and that's why she kept it going. Warped reflection. You're supposed to be able to read her mind. Yeah. So later, I learned the reason why she did it is that she wanted to warm up the car. I can understand that. We have to do that in Arizona. Sometimes in the wintertime, there's like a thick layer of ice or just a layer of ice, and we have to sit there and heat up the car. It actually gets pretty cold in the desert. So I understand that. But she left the curtain open not to keep her eye on it, but if someone were to come by and see the car running, they might think that someone with the curtain open could see the car and think not to rob it. That just has so much flawed logic. If they see the window open, they can see that there's no one there watching. Yeah, things didn't go. Wikipedia snippet says, "Oh, that didn't take long for things to go sour." All right, so she left. She came back, and we had a further discussion about it. And she made up her mind that I simply just didn't care, that I was being a selfish asshole. I'm like, well, no, no, I just wasn't awake. And she's like, I don't care what you told me. I already know the truth. For her, she always knew what the truth was, and it didn't matter if I had a logical explanation. It was just she knew the truth. Nothing I could say could change her mind. That I didn't really have a side, or rather, I had a side of the story, but I wouldn't be honest about my side of the story. It's like she'd often say that I was taking advantage of her or manipulating her. I'm like, I'm not manipulating you. And it's like, well, let's just say that you are. Would you honestly admit that you are? Would you say that you weren't manipulating me? I'm like, that's a slippery slope right there. I mean, yes, everyone could technically be lying to you, and they would say that they were telling you the truth if they were lying to you. Um, but it's like my actions should have proven that I've been honest with her, that I did everything she ever asked of me. I always leave. And sometimes I could be gone from anywhere from 2 hours to 8 hours, but I could be gone for 14 hours in a single day sitting at McDonald's. I'll get to that in just a moment. But, anyways, back to this point. So, as with any argument, it eventually evolves to cover other things. And I wanted to explain that, her actions, her decisions affect me. And that when she makes, because initially I only stayed out until 9 p.m. and then I was allowed back in. But then she changed it to 9:30. Then she changed it to 10:30. Some nights I didn't actually get back into the apartment until 11 p.m. at night. And usually I didn't leave until 3 p.m. So that's 8 hours I had to stay out. And, McDonald's eventually closes. So, I mean, they never gave me any trouble, but it's like, I don't want to be there. So I was saying to her that, it's like with your kids, you're trying to maximize your time. And the point I was going to make with that is you're trying to maximize your time with that. But when you make those decisions to extend longer, that's affecting me. That means I get back later, it takes me longer to go to sleep, and then I have to be out at the same time. I get very little done as a result. But once I said, "You try to maximize your time with your kids," she rushed over at me, picked up my laptop, and started hitting me with it. She just kept swinging at me and hitting me, and, I fell to the floor, and I was, blocking myself. So she was basically hitting my wrist with my laptop, the same laptop I'm using right now. And, um, that was a very scary moment. Oh, it's just so hard to think about too, but it and she kept screaming, "You don't talk about someone's family. You don't talk about someone's kids." It's not even like I said something bad. All I said is she maximizes her time with her kids. But she was always quick to extremes. She would immediately jump to, well, if I'm saying something about her kids, it must be bad, and I shouldn't be saying it at all, even though I was making a very valid point. But and I'm like, hun, please put down the laptop. And it's a strange moment to be in because, yeah, she's physically abusing me. And yeah, she could do some actual damage to me, but I was more worried about the laptop. I mean, I had just become a freelance writer. I need my laptop in order to write. I need, and without it, there goes my future. If I have any chance of making it, I have to, I need my laptop. She held my future in her hands and wanted to use it to hurt me. And she knew that I cherished my laptop, so that's why she picked it up. Warped Reflection says, now you know why she went through two husbands. I'm beginning to question because she certainly told me her side of the story, but after being with her, I'm starting to question a lot of that. Um, and that's the hard thing when you suffer an abuser from who you love. Is you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. You don't want to see them for the abuse that they gave you, and it really fucks up with your mind. It's like on one hand, they're this horrible person that tried to hurt you, but on the other hand, there's extenuating circumstances. Well, so I was more worried about the laptop, and I'm like, "Hun, please put it down. Please put it down." And she's like, "You don't get to tell me what to do in my own home." and and she had no remorse about it either. It's like she didn't even really realize what she had done. She just kept doing it. And you know, certainly being in the men's movement, I know that I basically have three choices. One, make myself seem as pathetic as possible in order for her to stop. Two, hit her back. Or three, call the police. The problem with the last two options is that could result in me being arrested. And later, when I had told her that, she's lucky I didn't call the cops on her, she's like, well, if the cops would have arrested anyone, it would have been you because I would have told them that you were the abuser because there's no way that I would go to jail. So she really confirmed what I was thinking at that moment. So I started like begging her and pleading her. And I did it. I even started apologizing. Hon, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Even though I knew it was bullshit, I was just telling her anything I could to get her to stop. And it's a very shameful thing to admit that I cowered. I cowered away. Um, I basically acted like a coward. I just begged and pleaded her. I had tears in my eyes. Please, please put down the laptop. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I'll never do it again. And, it's not even because I'm a man, but it's just like I wasn't wrong. I did nothing wrong. And yet I'm the one who's having to apologize. I'm begging her to stop hitting me. I'm begging her to stop destroying my laptop. And I thought my laptop was destroyed at that point because the battery was like ripped away from it as she was beating me. It flew off, and I was just so scared at that point. It actually took her a long time to apologize to me. Well, she eventually apologized later that day, but at first, whenever she gave an apology, I'm like, "Aren't you sorry for what you've done?" And she's like, "Well, I'm sorry that I hit you, but you shouldn't have been talking about my kids." I'm like, "That's not an apology. If your apology is, you know, I'm sorry for doing something wrong, but it's actually your fault and you shouldn't have done something, that's not an apology." Um, I can't say that it never did happen again. She never hit me, but I could tell she wanted to. There was one time during an argument, she took a folding chair and just for like 5 minutes. And I could tell that she wanted to direct that anger at me. She wanted to hurt me, but she didn't. And that's the one saving grace in all of this. You know, but it's like I told her, it's like if I could leave right now, I would. But I really didn't want to go back to the shelter. I mean, I had spent so much money to be there. I was going to make the full use of it while I was there. I decided right then I was going to go back to Arizona. I wasn't going to try to stay in Detroit and get Section 8 housing. Um, because I was always on the fence about going back to Arizona. Because she actually got angry with me when I told her first I was thinking about it. And she's like, "Well, I guess my friendship is just not good enough for you." It's like, you're the one who broke up with me. Why should I feel sorry for you when you're the one who decided that you didn't want to make the relationship work? Wikipedia snippet. I just came in. Did these events happen recently? This happened about a month ago. And it was actually the reason why I'm now in Arizona. I just came back to Arizona about 3 days ago. And I continued to live with her for the remainder of that month until I could leave because I really had nowhere else to go. The situation sometimes, in some ways, it improved. In a lot of ways, it really didn't. But she never hit me again. We still got into a lot of arguments. She never really tried to see things from my point of view. She would often say, because like if I didn't do the dishes for one day, she's like, "Well, I feel like you're just taking advantage of me." And it's like, I do everything you ask me to do. I leave for up to 14 hours a day. I um make the bed, I do the laundry, I do everything I can. And yet she still just always says that I take advantage of her, that I'm manipulating her, that I don't respect her. And of course, I would always tell her that it feels like she doesn't care about me at all. I try to tell her what my problems are, and she would always say, "Well, you're just a crybaby." It's like I didn't have any problems. I was just complaining to complain. And she later cited that, she's known a lot of people who complained in their lives, but then that's all they made their lives out to be was just their complaints. They didn't do anything more with their lives. I was trying to become a freelance writer. I did amazing work despite the setbacks that I had. And she's like, "Well, yeah, you eventually proved to me that you're not one of these people." But I don't even look at, the issues I brought up as complaints necessarily as her treating me unfairly. But she didn't care. To her, it was just complaints. It was just me not getting my way and me trying to force her to do what I wanted. But, if there was some give and take here, that would be one thing. But it was always I had to do what she wanted. There was no extenuating circumstance. There was no gray area. There was no compromise on her part. It was always, "Well, you have to do this and that's it." Like one morning she's like, "Well, I'm going to be back by 3:30." And then she calls me up at like 8 in the morning because she had already left. And she calls me up in the 8 in the morning. It's like, "Well, my son is sick, so you actually have to leave." And I'm like, I didn't get to sleep until 4 in the morning. "Well, what do you want me to do? I can't take my son anywhere else." I had to leave. I couldn't say no in that situation. I couldn't say, no, I can't do it. I need my sleep. And it was just how horrible the situation is. I mean, it was physical, mental, and financial abuse. I mean, she would make sure that she got everything she wanted. And if I tried to tell her, well, I need, there's other things that I need. Like, for instance, early on, when we started living together, I needed to do a meeting with the other people that I'm doing the calendar with. But I compromised with her because she was staying with her kids until 9 p.m. So I told everyone, okay, 9 p.m. will be when the meeting's at. It's a little late, but they agreed to do it. Last minute, she's like, "Oh, well, I'm actually staying with my kids until 9:30." I'm like, "Well, I have a meeting at 9 o'clock. I arranged to have this." It's like, "Well, just tell them that you can't make it until 9:30." And it's like 9 o'clock is already late enough. And yeah, they were agreeable to do it, but I shouldn't have had to do that. She should have respected that I had something I needed to do. I tried working with her, but her way of working with me was me just do everything she wants. So I had to delay it by half an hour. It was a horrible place to live in. Sorry, Wikipedia snippet says, and as Paul Elam says, gynocentric couples therapists are worse than useless, assuming you have the ability to see them in the first place. It was just one nightmare after another. Every day was just a new thing. And it's like eventually I just couldn't take being at McDonald's because I tried going to the library, but that was a half an hour, a 90-minute walk away. And my feet really couldn't take it. And I really damaged my feet pretty bad because of that. I already had flat feet. And then I tried taking a bus to another library because there wasn't a bus to that one I was 90-minute walk away. But the other library was a bus ride that was 90 minutes away. So I just I ended up going to McDonald's. Problem with being at McDonald's, even though they had a dining room area, is there was music playing, there was a TV going, there's conversations happening, there's bright lights everywhere. Sometimes there would just be kids in there screaming up the walls, and it's like I'm sitting there trying to work. And of course, her solution is, well, why don't you put your headphones in? It's like headphones don't really cancel out noise. They just make it so you can hear your audio better. And it's like, well, why don't you listen to music? I don't want to listen to music. I can't listen to music while I write. It's like, well, you're just being difficult. I was like, how about you just show me some respect and maybe, set an actual time I can come in and stop changing it every week. I'm glad to be out of there. And I don't hold her into too much contempt. I mean, I should, but like I said, it's hard when you're in a relationship with someone, even though we were broken up, we were still living together. It's hard to actually hold her in contempt. And that's how it fucks up with your mind. You wonder how people get into these situations where they're with an abuser, or you wonder how they stay with it for so long. I mean, I really had nowhere else to go. I mean, I could have gone back to the shelter, but the shelter, the thing is when people give the suggestion, go to a shelter, I'm betting almost certainly they've never been to a shelter themselves. And I have. I've been to a homeless shelter and it's no picnic. I mean, you're in a environment where, you've got to constantly watch your back. I mean, I've never been attacked at a shelter, but certainly I've had racism come my way about kill all white people. And it was even said directly in front of me, and the person's like, "No, no, no, you're cool, but all other white people need to die." And but it's like you also got to be worried about people stealing your stuff. You can never be away from your stuff for very long. And when I would go take a shower at night, I'd have to ask someone else to watch my stuff. So, having come from the shelter into this situation, yeah, I could have gone back to the shelter. I really didn't want to. Between the two, with her was far better. It allowed me to be more productive, even though I had limited productivity. I could still eat at a decent time, which I couldn't really do at the other shelter. Their dinner time was 3 p.m. To me, that's lunch, and for them, that was dinner time. And once you were in the shelter, you couldn't get back out until the next morning. Shannon talks about her experience that she got beat for 2 years straight and escaped when he forgot to take her phone away when he went out for one day. And that's the other thing that kind of throws me for a loop because does it even really classify as domestic violence if it only happened once? I mean, I endured her other abuses for 2 months straight, but the actual physical abuse, I mean, Shannon, she went through it for 2 years, as she has said. And I'm not trying to compare myself to her or her compared to me, but it's just like, people have suffered a lot worse than me. Is it really fair to say that I'm a victim? And I'm sure everyone would say, well, abuse is abuse, and whether it happens once or 100 times, you're a victim. It happened to you, it's going to mess with your mind. But at the same time, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. It only happened once, the actual physical part. So, as Shannon says, it does count. But let me go ahead and wrap this all up. So after the abuse happened, and was still staying there. I mean, if I could have just disconnected from her altogether, I would have. But I was still there for a couple of weeks. I think I was still there for 3 weeks after it happened because I had a plane flight on December 1st. And right now, that was the only thing I was waiting for. We ended up not going to Philadelphia to pick up my stuff because it required me to pay for it. And because I didn't have a credit card, to rent a car would require an additional $500. I don't have that kind of money. My mother has said that she will try to take a vacation during May time, the month of May, to try to drive up and get the remainder of my stuff. So that's nice of her. But it's like I have to wait 5 more months, 6 more months to get my stuff. Um, Wikipedia snippet says that horror stories like this are far too common. Shannon says that she guarantees that would have happened again if I had stayed. I'm pretty certain it would have. Eventually, she would have done it. She has the mentality of she just does whatever comes to her mind without any forethought about how bad it was. She just acts, and she doesn't even really think about it either. She doesn't come back and like, wow, I did something really bad, I should do something to make it up. As far as she was concerned, there was no problem in our friendship because I asked her, well, what do you think the current state of our friendship is after all of this happened, like a week after it happened? And she's like, I think we're okay. And I'm like, I don't. I think we're barely hanging on by a thread. And she's like, well, if you think we have a problem, then you need to work to figure something out. And I'm like, you abused me. You physically abused me. You held my future in your hands with my laptop and nearly destroyed my future. If my laptop had been damaged, that's it. I probably would have killed myself because without my laptop right now, I have no way of being a freelance writer, so it was a very big deal to me. Um, and I don't mean to be dramatic, but that is how I felt. Had my laptop been destroyed, it would have just destroyed everything. And I tried telling her, it's like, look, the way the male mind works, that when it comes to suffering a traumatic event, men don't deal with it right away. Um, and it could take us years for it to finally come back to us. And then it just, boom, we're just chaotic. And I'm not saying that women deal with it right as it happens, but they're able to deal with it usually within the first year of it happening. And whatever psychological problems come to them, it usually comes to them within a short time. Not to say that it can't last for years, but for men, it's like we kind of bury it and then it comes back in other ways. Oftentimes, we don't even realize that the problems we're having is because of some abuse that happened. Not everyone is like that. I'm using generalities right now. So if there's a woman out there that took her years, or if there was a guy out there that dealt with it immediately, there are always outliers. But generally, that is what happens. So I kept trying to say to her, well, if you want to have a friendship with me, we need to make new memories, new good memories. And she refused. She's like, well, we have good memories in the past. Are those not good enough for you? I'm like, you abused me. And the good memories she's talking about, it's like we went to a science center together. That she's like, oh, I'll take you to a science center. Last minute, she's like, can you pay for it? She agreed to take me to the movies. Last minute, can you pay for it? She never really paid for anything. I mean, the only thing she ever paid for was the apartment. I had to pay for pretty much everything else. But I came to understand that the only way our friendship worked, and I use friendship in quotes here, is if she wasn't required to do anything. If she could just sit back and do nothing, the friendship was fine. If I required her to do something, then suddenly I was a horrible person. Wikipedia says zero self awareness and accountability on her part, and that is very true. She didn't think that she really did anything wrong or that she acknowledged she did something wrong. She said she was sorry, and that was good enough. And either I forgive her or I don't, but she's not going to beg for my friendship, which is something she said. I'm not going to beg for your friendship. Either you like me or you don't. And it's like, you fucked up. You did something really wrong. You want me to forgive you just like that. Shannon says that she's 8 years out and it still hits her in waves. Um, so we never did anything again with each other. And it actually makes it easier for me to disconnect myself from her. Um, I will say that we did work out some sort of arrangement, and she agreed to pay my phone bill for the next 8 months, which is only like $40 on her plan. I don't expect her to actually do it, but if I can get her to do it for a few months, then I can get myself on my own plan. But at the very least, with all of this, that I now understand more about what it means to be in an abusive situation. I understand now what it means to be in a homeless shelter. And when we talk about these issues all the time, and the majority of us have never experienced these problems, well, being in an abusive relationship and being homeless, we're talking from a level of ignorance. Not all of us, as Shannon is an example, but and certainly there are other issues though that usually get people into the movement. Um, but it's usually one issue that they have. And it's kind of strange to say, but in some ways, I'm fortunate having gone through these experiences. I can better understand them and I can better talk about them. But I guess I'm just trying to find a silver lining in all of this. Going through that abuse was extremely tough, especially since I had nowhere else to go. And that most often happens with people in abusive situations. There are no resources. There's rarely any resources out there. As we talk about with the lovely ladies calendar, there are only like three shelters in the United States for men who suffer domestic violence. And certainly I had a lot of friends during that time, but there's nothing any of them could have really done. And I don't hold it against them. I mean, I put myself into this situation and I should have seen the warning signs. And by the end of it, well, before I moved in with her, it's like I invested too much into this. I'm going to make it work. I've given a lot of money, I've given a lot of my time, and she just took advantage of it all the time. Um, Especially, there's a saying that, people who make accusations are actually covering up their own indiscretions. And she's saying that I manipulated her, I took advantage of her, might be in some way of her saying that she's manipulated me, she's taken advantage of me. And she really was. I mean, it got to a point where I'm borrowing money from my family just to keep her off my back. Something she refused to do for herself. She's like, "Well, my family can't really help me." I'm like, "My family can't really help me, and I still got help from them." But, all that really mattered to her is that she saw her kids. And, she kept extending the time. And I later learned that she was doing it against her husband. Her husband wanted to spend time with the kids, but she kept pushing back the time so she would get more time and he'd get less time. So she had options. She also had other family that would watch them. And, I don't mean to sound so cold and heartless that I understand she wanted to be with her kids. And that makes her a good mother for wanting to be with her kids as much as possible. But that also meant that I was expendable, that she could sacrifice anything I needed because her kids were far more important. Bring this up to her, she's like, "Well, I don't think of you as expendable. If that's what you think, that's all on you." And it's like, your actions say it. She's like, "Yes, but that's not how I feel. You should know how I feel. And if you don't, then there's no hope for you." And it's like, it doesn't matter how you feel about something. What matters is your actions. I will say this, though, that part of the reason why I really wanted this to work is that she was pro men's movement. And despite the fact of having two failed marriages and two kids, I mean, every warning bell in my head went off. Stay away from this woman. Because we hear about these kind of women that, marry for stupid reasons and then they get divorced and suddenly they want the good guy, but they're too stuck in their ways. And sure enough, it was true here. Just because a woman understands the men's movement doesn't mean that we should automatically trust her. And I'm not going MGTOW here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we shouldn't trust any women at all. But just because a woman says she's for men's right doesn't mean that she's immediately trustworthy. Shannon states that her dad was falsely accused of pedophilia. Wow, that brought me to the men's rights movement. His life was ruined, and he never recovered from it until his death 7 years ago. She goes on to say, abusers isolate you and alienate you from anyone who would be able to help you, so they can keep you hostage. I really think that that's true. I really do think she kept me hostage because, she needed gas money. And if I didn't give her gas money, that meant she got less time with her kids. So, but as I was saying, just because a woman says she's a part of the men's movement, don't automatically trust her on that alone. Look at everything. And had I done that, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But there is some good that's come out of this. I am no longer concerned about having a relationship. Again, I'm not going MGTOW here, but it was like before that, I always felt like she was the one who got away. That with her, she was like my ideal woman. With her, she was just like the perfect um, person for me. And so long as she existed in this world, there was always hope for me. But hope can actually drive you insane if it's the wrong kind of hope. So, and for me, it was the wrong kind of hope because I would just drive myself crazy. Oh, I'm lonely. There's someone out there for me, but I'm disabled and I can't go out there and meet them. It was difficult to deal with. Having been with her and realized that she's not my perfect person, that she was the exact opposite, it's actually a bit freeing. I'm not concerned about being in a relationship right now. I'm concerned about getting my life back in order. I mean, I'm not giving up on women, I'm not giving up on relationships, but I can just set it aside, and that she did for me by being a horrible abuser, yes, but at least right now, I'm not concerned in any way about meeting someone or being in a relationship or even the prospects of marriage. I can spend this time to take care of myself and be in a better position that I can meet someone that I want to be with versus being with someone that, I think I can't do any better than this person. So I know I know it does sound like MGTOW rhetoric, and I don't mean for it to sound like that. I still have a lot of friends in this movement, a lot of women that I do trust, but right now I've got to take care of myself. So along came a rat asks if I'm back in Mesa. Yes, I am back in Mesa. I am living with my mother again, and even though that living with my mother was the reason why I left for Philadelphia in the first place, I haven't seen her in 2 years, and so far it's going okay. I imagine we're just in a honeymoon period right now, and things will go back to being bad. But I don't know. I feel like I'm a different person, and maybe if I can demonstrate that I'm a different person, that maybe it won't be so bad. But I also know that I need to work to get myself out of here. So, but I have hope. For the first time in 5 years, I have hope. I'm a freelance writer. I have a very good client right now that just really loves my writing. And I'm quite certain that if I work really hard in the next few months, maybe even a year's time, I can be in a position to where I can live by myself. I can get health insurance. I can get a new computer because, well, my computers really, really suck and I can't do any video editing with them, which I need to in order to secure my future. Wikipedia snippet tells me says not Black Mesa. I don't know. That did have a pretty good break room. I mean, all that funding, at least they took care of their employees right up until the very end. Um, Shannon says, "Don't let the cripple life hold you down." That was one thing that I often talked to her about. She always felt like I was just giving up, and it's like I'm still here. I'm still trying. And as long as I'm alive, it means that I'm still trying, that I haven't given up. Um, and it's like, the great thing about this freelance stuff is like I set myself up a website, and then when I actually started looking for clients, within 24 hours, I had someone who was really interested in me, and in another 24 hours, they hired me. So that's how I know I'm on the right path. And this was after 2 months of being a ghostwriter for a horrible company. So I haven't given up. I'm still trying. I'm not letting this set me back, but I did want to discuss it in public, not to victimize myself, but to be a form of support for people out there that so many of us suffer through this. And it's like I said, my only option was to look as pathetic as possible. And that does mess with my mind. It's like, could I have done anything else? But no, I really couldn't. And it's demoralizing in many ways. And it's probably going to affect me for many years to come. And I may talk about this again in the future, but as Shannon says, it counts. It counts as abuse. I mean, whether it was one time or 2 years straight, it's abuse and it's going to mess with your mind. So, if anyone ever wants to talk to me about anything that they've dealt with, um, message me on here or find me on Twitter, ggmad_cat. Because you, being a person from outside looking in, you don't think that it will affect you, but once you go through it, it does. It does affect you. And one of the only memories I really have of her anymore because of my bad memory is just her beating me. I can still see it so vividly and the fear that I felt in that moment. So, anyways, I think everyone in chat, Wikipedia snippet, Shannon Gibbs, um, Warped Reflection. I think I'm forgetting one person. Oh, and Along Came a Rat. Thank you for joining me in this chat. I'm going to try to do more of these in the near future, but probably not at the level that I did, at least not for the next year, because I need to focus on my freelance career. I need to build that up so I can start making some good money with that. But you'll see me pop up here and there. But Shannon says that she sometimes gets flashbacks. Yeah, but yeah, I don't. I lost my train of thought. But anyways, I'm going to skedaddle. Thank you, everyone. This is Mad Cat signing out.